Without further ado, please welcome on the stage, Johnny FD.
Appreciate it. Hey everyone, I'm Johnny. I'm really, really excited to be giving this talk. Not because this is something that anyone asked for. In fact, a lot of you might be like thinking, why is he talking about retirement? We're young, we're traveling, we're adventurous, we're having fun. And the reason why I'm giving this talk is it's something that even though we might not be thinking about it right now, it's something that we should probably all think of at some point. So just out of curiosity, how many people here are actually actively investing for your retirement already? Oh, good job. I'm actually very impressed. How many here aren't yet, but probably should be? All right. And really, that half of the room is the people I really want to drive this into. Because as a location-independent entrepreneur, as a digital nomad, it is really easy just to enjoy the crap out of life and just scale up our businesses, scale up our lifestyles, travel more, do more epic shit. But even though this topic isn't sexy, it's something that I promise you, it's something that you're gonna be glad that you learned and you started thinking about early. And the earlier you do it, the better. So I'm gonna be talking about how everybody in this room, but also everyone watching this on YouTube or back home, can retire one day as a digital nomad, even as a millionaire nomad, hopefully. So we're gonna use these two guys as examples. We have Money Mark, we have Saving Steve. So Money Mark is crushing it. He's making 20K a month in profit. He's the guy you see drive a Ducati, or these big super bikes, and he's always posting photos of his private villa in Bali by the pool, or his penthouse suite in Medellin. Right? He's balling out. He drinks, he parties, and he pretty much spends everything that he makes. Now, Saving Steve is probably more of your typical average Chiang Mai nomad that you'll meet. He enjoys eating Thai food, he drives a scooter, and he lives below his means. Even with travel and enjoying himself, he only spends about $1,000, maybe $1,500 a month, but he's making $3,000 in profit. Not that hard to achieve. Most people in this room are either already doing that or can pretty easily do that in a few months. So the question is, who do you think is better off? And who do you think you would rather be? Not right now, maybe, because maybe Money Mark is just balling out and having fun. But who do you think will be better off in 5, 10, or 20 years? Saving Steve. Actually, Money Mark, because he can just stop doing all that. But most people don't. Did you know that the average American has less than $1,000 in total net worth? In fact, most of us are in debt. And it's not just Americans. This is really a worldwide trend now. And even those with some money, 85% of Americans, supposedly one of the richest countries on earth, or not countries, yeah, we are a country, are never gonna be able to retire because Social Security is probably gonna be gone, pensions are probably gonna be gone, and by having $10,000 or less when you retire isn't really much of a retirement. That's less than a few months' expenses for most people. So this is the theme that I want everyone to understand. It's not how much money you make. We all focus on making more money, scaling up our businesses. It doesn't actually matter. What matters is how much of that you keep. And what matters even more is how hard that money works for you. Has anyone here read Rich Dad, Poor Dad? Very nice. This is a chart or a concept that he talked about that a lot of us actually kind of skipped through. Yet it's so important, he wrote a second book just on this topic called the cash flow quadrant. Cash flow quadrant. And this is something that I want everyone to start thinking about is which category are you in right now? Just out of curiosity, who here is an employee? Whether you're a remote employee or you work for someone back home. Can you just raise your hands nice and high? Perfect. How many people here are self-employed? Most of us in the room. And how many of us are business owners? Very cool. Here's the thing. I would have raised my hand as a business owner, if you asked me a year or 2 years ago. But in fact, most of us are not true business owners. Most of us are self-employed. We own a business, but we're not really a business owner. And what's the difference? Mainly, if you take yourself out of the business completely, and I'm not talking about traveling for 2 weeks or even a month, I'm talking about, let's say you completely go on hiatus for a year. Is your business first even still gonna be there? But the second, is it gonna grow without you? Examples of true business owners are people who own, let's say, a McDonald's franchise or a Papa John's, and they have a store manager, maybe a regional manager, maybe they have a whole marketing department, or if you have a really actual big business, you have a CFO, you have a CEO. You can be the founder and completely remove yourself out of the business, and chances are it can still grow even when you're out of it. And it doesn't mean that it's bad to be self-employed. It means we just have to understand exactly where we actually are and have a bit of a reality check. Because when I owned my e-commerce stores, even though I'd be proud of being a small business owner or being a business owner, in reality, I was working a job that I loved. I built a system that I loved. Now, the reason why I bring this up is this fourth quadrant, I didn't even mention. And it's because when I read the book, I just skipped over it, thinking, that'd be nice. I don't have any money to invest, so I can't be an investor. That's not even for me. And here's the thing, is 100% of us in this room right now should be striving to get to that fourth quadrant. Whether we can get there today or in 10 years, that is the ultimate form of passive income. That is the only stream of passive income that really is completely hands-off. And the reason why I know this is one of the big stock management firms, I think it was Fidelity, they did a study to see which of their customers had the best returns over 10 or 20 years. And it wasn't the people actively trading or actively logging in all the time. It was the people that either had died or have forgotten they had an account. When your money is earning you money, it's actually better to just forget about it and walk away. So this is the topic of today's talk, is I'm gonna teach you how to build your passive income machine or buy one. Imagine being able to go on Amazon and just purchase something that prints you passive income. How many people would buy that? It'd be stupid not to, right? But here's the thing, is it actually exists. And this is how we upgrade from Saving Steve to Steve 2.0. So here are kind of three kind of thoughts that everyone should have. And I'm curious who here thinks it's true or false. Okay, so the first is the rich gets richer. True or false? True. Some of us might resent that as well, like, damn it, yeah. But it's true. How many here believe that compound interest is a bitch? Anyone who has ever had credit card debt knows it is really hard to get out under it. Once you start owing money, it stacks and stacks and stacks. Even if you're paying the minimum, it just gets higher and higher and becomes really hard to crawl yourself out of. The nice thing is compound interest works the other way as well, where once you start having money and that money is making you money, it is really easy for that money to continue making you money. The third is not everybody can be a millionaire. Is that true or false? It's false. And I'm gonna show you some math on how at least everyone in this room we are so fortunate where we're in a position where every single person in this room, I promise, can retire as a millionaire one day. How many people can read this and actually understand it? It's one of these charts where we should have learned this in school. And it's ridiculous that we didn't. By the time we're 17, we should know how to read a financial statement, or in this case, a compound interest calculator, because it's important. And the fact that our schools failed us to even be able to read something like this and understand it, it really shows that it is up to us to educate ourselves financially. Every single person in the world should be forced to understand this before they get a credit card. So, no worries, I'm gonna show you guys how to understand it. And that's actually not that hard when someone explains it. So first, you have your kind of starting amount. Let's say everybody here has $1,000 to invest as a start. And we're gonna put another $1,000 in every single month. Just to make the math easy, it can be more, it can be less. After 12 months, how much do we have? 12,000. After 10 years, approximately how much did we save? 120,000. Pretty simple. But here's where compound interest gets really exciting, is not only did we save $120,000, which otherwise we probably would have spent on villas and partying, we have also now earned $65,000 in interest for doing pretty much nothing, just putting that money aside. So at the end of 10 years, we don't have 1,000, we don't have 12,000, we don't have 120,000, we have $186,000. Pretty nice. Now, imagine we double that to 20 years. Does that amount double? Do we now have 372,000? Right? We have way fucking more. And why? It's because our original money that we invested is still earning interest. All those little Steve 2.0 worker bees that we produced, they're still making us money. So now instead of having 240,000 that we actually saved, we have almost triple that at 600 grand. That's pretty amazing. Now, most people in this room are fortunate enough to be at an age where in about 30 years, more or less, we're gonna be of official retirement age. And the earlier you get started, the easier it becomes. Now, what's really cool is instead of having 600 grand to retire off of, if you continued putting just $1,000 a month in, and you never, even if you never grow it, assuming our businesses will grow, our profits will grow, it'd be pretty easy to bump that up by $100 a year or something. But even if we just put $1,000 in every single month consistently for the next 30 years, what's really amazing is we would all end up with $1.5 million. And the math doesn't lie. You can run it, plug in your own numbers, use it. It's called a compound interest calculator. And congratulations, you retired as a millionaire. Yeah, you can make it rain. You can drive around on a scooter in Thailand. But here's the thing, is some of you might be thinking, how the F am I gonna save $1,000 a month? I'm barely saving anything now. We as digital nomads or location independent entrepreneurs are so freaking fortunate where we're in a position where it's not that hard to either make an extra $1,000 a month or save an extra $1,000 a month. If we were living back home and we had a normal job, it'd be pretty hard to cut your expenses by $1,000. It'd be even harder to ask your boss for a $1,000 a month raise. But as location independent entrepreneurs, there are so many things we can do to cut our expenses from $2,000 or $3,000 a month by $1,000. In fact, if any of you are traveling just for a few months, did you know that if you just extend that travel amount, you now can save $10,000, $20,000 a year on taxes for just traveling longer? As Americans, we have something called the foreign earned income exclusion, where as long as we are out of the country for 11 months of the year, we don't have to pay any federal income tax on the first $100,000 you make a year. That right there is your $1,000 a month. Easy. And if you're Canadian or European, it could be as low as 6 months and 1 day. If anyone's going to the tax workshops, either with Estonia e-residency or Grace's Tax Savings for Americans, they'll answer all your questions about how to take advantage of either a lower tax bracket in Estonia versus in the rest of the EU, or take advantage of these tax breaks as Americans. In fact, Grace spoke at the Las Vegas conference a few months ago, and her talk is on YouTube. You can watch the whole thing. What else can we do? As business owners, we can increase our conversion rates. So whether you have an e-commerce store, you're selling ebooks, you're upselling products, whatever it is, if you can increase your conversion rate from the standard 1%, which is one person out of every 100 visitors buy something, to just 1.5%, which really isn't that difficult if you followed some of the talks today, like Tom's. All right. All of a sudden, instead of making, let's say, $2,000 a month, you're making $3,000 a month. And if you just invest that extra 1,000, voila, that is your money building machine. Whatever your business is, you can grow your business, make it more profitable. You can start another business, add another stream of income. You can sell the business and just invest that money and have that money make you money. There are so many options. And we have two good examples. I had Grace Taylor on the podcast Travel Like a Boss, episode 177, about tax savings. And Sean Dalton, who was the first speaker today, going from a service-based business as a photographer, making a fixed amount of money, to now growing his business by 5 or more times, and having that extra money to now invest, is just two examples of things that we can all do in this room to have at least $1,000 more a month to invest. Now, what do we do with this money once we have it? Once we have the $1.5 million, how do we actually retire? How long does that last us? What's really cool is instead of just having that money, where we used to withdraw from, remember, we are still earning money. We're still earning interest from that money even though we're withdrawing. So this is something called the 4% rule. It's pretty basic. There's a lot of, it's not perfect math because the economy is not perfect, things go up and down. But basically, it means if you are withdrawing 4% of your total net worth every single year, and you're earning 5% or more in interest, which really isn't that hard to do, you can basically withdraw money forever. And here's a chart where it just shows if you started with $1 million, not even 1.5, and you withdrew 4%, which is about $40,000 a year. After taxes, maybe $3,000 a month, which is more than enough to live here in Chiang Mai or another retirement place. What would happen in 10, 20, or 30 years? Well, what's really cool is if you're earning 5, 7, 8% interest, the money that you're making from interest is actually outpacing your withdrawal, even if you are giving yourself a raise every year to keep up with inflation. The reason why we have to account for that is because things get more expensive. If anyone thinks about the cost of food back home 5 or 10 years ago, price of gas, price of real estate, things get more expensive. So even though $40,000 a year right now is plenty to live in cheap places like Thailand, I guarantee you in 10, 20, 30 years, even in Chiang Mai, that's probably not going to be enough. So we're going to have to give ourselves a raise to keep up with inflation. So with these numbers, we're basically giving ourselves a 2% raise every year to keep up with inflation. So the first year, we withdraw $40,000. By year 10, we're withdrawing close to $50,000. By year 20, almost $60,000. By year 30, we're withdrawing $70,000. So we're earning more money every single year. But what's really, really cool is as long as we are increasing our net worth by 5% or more, in this case 7%, that money really kind of never runs out. If anything, at the end of 38 years, instead of just having $1 million, you now have $3.3 million. And this is why people get so angry at people who get inheritances or people who have like old money. It's because that shit never runs out. People are like, yeah, of course, your parents gave you $5 million. Of course your life is easy. But that starts somewhere. And why not start with us? Imagine what you can do with $3.3 million when you die. You can give it to your kids. You could donate it to your favorite charity. You can start a foundation. You can get a library with your name on it. You can do whatever you want. You can really make big changes in the world and still enjoy life today. Now, some of you might be thinking, I don't want to wait 30 years to retire. I'm already 55, or I want to retire early. I want to retire young. I want to have financial independence, retire early. Now, here are some ways where you can level that up quicker. You can skip levels. Instead of waiting 30 years to get to that point, this is how we can eat that mushroom and whoop, whoop. So obviously, you could start with a larger investment. A lot of us have more than $1,000 in the bank. We can just start with more. You can save more than $1,000 a month. If we're increasing our businesses and now we're making 10 grand a month, following everything that you learned from today from all the different speakers, why increase our expenses up to 10 grand? Why not just keep spending $1,200 a month, $1,500 a month, whatever it is, and just invest the rest? Or if you have a business that you can sell, whether it's an e-commerce store, an FBA product, a private brand, a travel blog, whatever it is, and you can get a big windfall of cash, you can put all that money into an investment and you can start having that money earn you money now. So these are 3 ways where we can just skip levels. Instead of waiting 10, 20, 30 years to be able to retire, you can technically do it in 5 or 10. And this is how I did it. I basically just did a little bit of each, because I just like to test everything. So I increased the profits from my businesses. I increased my conversion rates from 1% to 2%, which not only doubles your profit, it actually triples it because you're spending the same amount in ad spend. I added more streams of income. I sold not just 1, but 3 of my dropshipping stores. I just kept doing it. I was like, oh, this is working. Let me build another one, run it for a year, and sell it again. I took all that money and I started investing it, and then I just clicked a box called reinvest my dividends. And all that means is when those investments pay you money, instead of having to go to your bank, it just goes back into that investment. And most importantly, I kept my expenses low. Even when I was crushing it and I was just really in that entrepreneur mindset and I wasn't, focused on as much travel or doing fun projects, I was just like, I just want to work and I just want to make a lot of money. Even when I was making $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 a month, I never increased my living expenses. I might have increased it, by $500 or something. Maybe I bought the new iPhone. But that's it. And I actually got in a fight with my girlfriend at the time. She was like, because she read my income report on my blog, she's like, you're making 30 grand a month? Why are we staying at a 12,000 baht apartment in Chiang Mai? And it was so hard to explain to her. I'm like, I'm trying to invest for our future. Like, if, one day we could have this money-making machine and, we can retire early, we can travel on passive income. And she didn't understand. Which is why I'm single today. No, but seriously, that is probably the one best piece of advice I can give every single person here, is as you make more money, don't be tempted to spend more money. Keep your expenses relatively the same. Give yourself like little bumps here and there. Move into a slightly nicer place, but don't double, triple, your expenditure just because you can. So here are some rules for everyone who wants to start investing. Just kind of some tips, all right? The number one is you have to pay yourself first. What does that mean? That means as soon as money comes into your bank account, you need to invest it or save it. If you try to save what's left over, what's gonna happen? Nothing, you're gonna have nothing left. But if that $1,000 comes into your account and magically gets automatically invested, you probably won't even notice that that money is missing. Make sure you have 6 months worth of expenses somewhere in a savings account, just so you don't have to sell your investments when it's a down market. One really nice thing about living in cheap places like Chiang Mai is that might just be $6,000. Or in my case, when I was living really cheap, it was like $3,600. And that makes it so much more attainable than if you lived back in Canada or Denmark or somewhere expensive, Australia, where your monthly expenses might be $3,000 or $4,000. And to save 6 months of expenses is a lot of money. So once you have that $6,000 or whatever it is, 6 months of expenses in a savings account, then you can start investing your money. And actually even before then, most of us in the US have checking or savings accounts that pay how much interest? 0, right? Did you know there are online banks like Ally or Marcus by Goldman Sachs that pay 2% or more? And the only reason why they're able to do that is they don't have physical branches. You can't just walk into a B of A or Wells Fargo. And these are big banks. These are FDIC insured. You can transfer your money just like who the hell goes into a bank anyways? All right. And it's not just for Americans. Marcus works in the UK as well. I think they pay 1.85%, just a little bit less. For the Aussies out there, there's something called USaver. That right now is paying 1.81. If you're from Ukraine, one of the previous bank is paying 20%. I probably don't want to put my money in a Ukrainian bank, but wherever you're from, look around. Don't just have your money sit there and not make anything. 2.25% is way better than having your money make 0. So once you have this money and it's time to invest, what do? I recommend nobody try to time the market. We all, there's ups and downs. People are like, yeah, it's gonna go down, it's gonna go up. Nobody knows what's gonna happen. And if you've read any of these books, there's ones by Andrew Tobias and also Tony Robbins' Unshakable, it really just shows you that nobody understands what's gonna happen. Nobody can predict the future, and even the best hedge fund managers or financial advisors out there, they don't know what they're doing. Nobody can predict the future. And the best thing we can do, the only kind of guarantee, is something called dollar cost averaging, where instead of putting all your money in at once, or just holding it until one day where it's a good deal, you just put the same amount in every single month, basically forever. And that way, you're mathematically guaranteed to be in at an okay time. Everything that I'm talking about today is a long-term hold. It's not something that you buy and sell. I'm not trying to get anyone to be a day trader here. These are things that you buy and kind of just forget about. Pretend you died or you lost your password. All right? And the easiest thing to get started with is something called a low-cost index fund. What does that mean? It's very simple. With the advent of technology and algorithms nowadays, it makes it really easy to go to like Vanguard or something, buy a fund that basically just tracks the entire stock market. So the S&P 500, which is 500 of some of the biggest stocks, or a total stock market index, which might be 3,000 plus stocks. These things weren't possible 20, 30 years ago, but are now. And what's really cool about this is, in general, even though no one person, no matter how good of an investor they are, can really time the market and figure out what's going to happen, in general, the total stock market, at least in the US, has traditionally increased by about 10% a year. And all you have to do is sign up for one of these funds and forget that you had your money. Now, the reason why it's so important is if you put your money with a mutual fund manager or a financial advisor, they would charge you something like 1% management fee. And it might not seem like a lot of money, but over 10 or 20 years, especially over 30 years, that money ends up costing you a lot. And that's not just the 1% fee, it's the money that could have been making you money that ends up, you end up losing out on. So I'm not gonna get into too much of the details, but read one of these books and it gives you kind of a basis of it. The most important two things that I want to leave you with is if you're going to invest in something like speculative, like cryptocurrency or Bitcoin or a startup or something that potentially has a high risk and high return, don't put all your money in it. Because either you're going to feel like an idiot if and when it goes down, or even if it happens to make money, you'll still be an idiot for taking that gamble when you could have just played it safe and had a guaranteed millionaire retirement. So if you do really feel like you want to invest in money in something risky, don't put more than 5% of your total net worth in it. And that's my advice to you guys. And last but not least, this is probably the most important thing, is don't lose money. And the easiest way to guarantee that is don't sell during a downturn. The really nice thing about index funds, these kind of funds that tracks the entire stock market, is that unlike an individual stock, which sometimes we forget just represents an individual company, that one company, no matter how stable, might go to zero one day. And this has happened with big companies like Enron, maybe Coca-Cola one day, people will realize sugar is bad for you, it might go to zero. People might magically wake up like, this is bad for me? This thing that used to be made out of cocaine, and that was made out of new cocaine called high fructose corn syrup? So unlike individual stocks, if you're basically following the entire stock market, eventually, unless the US or the whole world kind of collapses, in which case it doesn't really matter anyways, eventually it'll go back up. And on average, throughout the history, the last 30, 40, 50 years, it's gone up by about 10%. So I'm gonna show you a couple case studies. This is actually my personal Vanguard account. And I was really tempted to show you a screenshot from 2 months ago where I had an average of 10% gains, which is pretty much what I've had since I've opened this account 5 years ago. And I'll probably go back up to that point pretty soon. Unfortunately, for the last just 2 or 3 months, the stock market has just crashed. It's really at a downturn right now. So that number has dropped to about 4.5%. But here's the thing to remember is as long as I don't sell, because my cost of living are low and I have passive income coming in still, also have 6 months of expenses, as long as I don't sell, I still own the same amount of shares. So it doesn't matter if each stock is worth 30% more or 30% less, I still have the exact same amount of shares, which means eventually, unless the world ends, it'll go back up. The ones I invest in is one's called VTI, which is the total stock market. It's US stocks only, but most US stocks are kind of international anyways. So that's called VTI. That has about 3,300 different stocks in it. Super low fees. Just because I don't think the US is going to be the one power player for the rest of time, I also invest in VXUS, which is total international stock market. And just because I like good values, I invest in something called VBR, which is small cap values. Don't worry about that. That's kind of optional. But this is kind of what I would recommend if anyone wanted to get started. Read those books so you understand how it actually works, and you really train yourself not to be tempted to sell during a downturn. But this is kind of the no-brainer advice that if you talk to anyone who understands finance and investing, they'll tell you, yeah, Vanguard, total stock market, you're probably fine. If you're the type who is not going to be disciplined, you're going to forget to invest $1,000 a month, you might sell, you might panic, you might worry. There's new Robo Advisors. There's one by Wealthfront, one by Betterment. There's one in the UK. There's one in Australia. There's different ones out there that basically they use software to help you invest your money, and most of them just buy these low-cost index funds anyways. This is my Wealthfront account, and what I would recommend is if you do go this route, set it at like a pretty high risk level, which means it's mostly stocks and a little bit less bonds, unless you're close to retirement age, and turn on the automatic repeating deposits. So whether it's $1,000 or whatever, just so that money goes out of your account before you can spend it. Another thing I invest in is something called Pure Street, which is real estate backed peer-to-peer loans. And what this is you basically let someone borrow money, but instead of just taking their word for it, you actually hold the deed to their house. So if they don't pay you back, you get a house. And the reason I want to show you this to you is most of these properties pay between 7 and 8% interest. So this is kind of just another way to be able to diversify and just not be just in the stock market. I co-host a podcast called Invest Like a Boss, and we've had on some really, really great companies. And we basically started this podcast because my co-host Sam Marks, who was a speaker one of the first years, like 5 years ago at the Nomad Summit, he sold his company and he had all of a sudden a few $1 million to invest and he didn't know what to do with it. And he got kind of screwed by a financial advisor who not only took a lot of fees, but actually lost their money. So he's like, I want to start this podcast just so I can ask all the questions that I have to these bosses when I want to interview, when I want to invest. So these are just a couple examples of things that I invest in that make on average 7% or more. So things like AHP Fund, which is a really good company called American Homeowners Preservation, where they actually buy bad mortgages, people that can't afford to pay their mortgages back, and they give them another chance to pay it back. Wealthfront, Betterment are these Robo Advisors, Realty Mogul, Fundrise, these are these kind of real estate funds. And then other random things like Yield Street, they actually buy something called like litigation cases where people are due money, but not for 1 or 2 years, and they just give them money now because they might need it for medical expenses or whatever, and they just take 10 or 13% or 15% or whatever it is. So these are just other examples of things that can potentially make 5% or more for your investments. And here's a screenshot of actually everything I invested. This is my personal net worth. And the reason why I'm sharing this is because I wish that other people would just be as transparent as like some of my mentors or people that really helped me, because it helps so much to be able to see actual numbers. Like you hear people talk about like, oh yeah, I invest in Bitcoin. How much do you invest in it? Is it $20 or is it $200,000? It's a big difference. But a lot of people don't talk about how much they actually, put in each investment, how much they believe in it themselves. So here is every single thing that I invest in, and also a percentage of the total. So most of my money is in Vanguard, in these index funds, because I believe in it. And I like to diversify, just because I don't know what's going to happen. And it's also kind of fun. So every time we have a new guest on, and it's a fund that we kind of like, I'm like, oh, I'll put 10 or 15 grand in it. And it's become my hobby. Instead of buying liabilities, daydreaming about buying the new car, moving into a more expensive place, buying that Gucci loafers, I now am like, yeah, I'm gonna buy this fund. And to me, it gets me just as excited. I'm still rocking an iPhone 7 because I'd rather take that $1,200 and buy an investment with it than have a new phone. It's more exciting to me, and it makes me money. So I want to leave you guys with a couple book recommendations. I really believe that every single person should educate yourselves, on financially. Don't take my word for it. Do your own research. I'm not a financial advisor, but also more importantly, we can't really trust most financial advisors. Most of them don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Unfortunately, my sister used to be a financial advisor, and she had no idea. She had no training. Merrill Lynch just basically said, oh, sell these 10 things. And we're at a day and age where there's enough information where we can all educate ourselves financially, and it's not that difficult. So Millionaire Next Door and Millionaire Fastlane are two really good books if you're still daydreaming about buying a sports car or spending money on expensive things. Rich Dad Poor Dad is really good about teaching how to, why you should buy assets and not liabilities. Dave Ramsey's book is really good if you're in debt, if you need to get out of debt first before you start investing. And then Tony Robbins' Money Master the Game is a really good overview where he interviewed a ton of financial experts and really explained in detail how finance works. So this is my goal for everyone, is instead of everyone just focused on how to make more money, which is important as entrepreneurs, I really want everyone to leave this conference with a plan to build your own money-making machine, because it is so important. And that's it. So thank you guys all for coming. All right, let's open up for some Q&A. Maybe we can grab some mics. By the way, you can download the slides at nomadsummit.com/retire.
I love this talk. Thank you so much for this. So one question I have for you. So I've done the 401k thing when I had the 9-to-5 job and got a good base there. So I have the traditional Vanguard, whatever things, right? How do I balance investing in my business versus investing in this passive stuff? Because we're trying to grow very fast and hire employees and buy inventory. And so I want, and I know there's a big risk, there's a big reward. And so how do I make that balance?
So it's a really good question, because the